All right, today was a long time coming. We're going to cancel moon landing deniers, those who subscribe to the theory that the moon landing was fake. I am finally addressing the subject on the show because I was provoked, and it's very easy to do, baited into this conversation over the weekend. I happened to mention on Twitter that I watched and very much enjoyed, for the second time, the movie First Man, which is, actually, we watched it with the older kids who really liked it as well. The excellent biopic about Neil Armstrong starring Ryan Gosling. And I wasn't trying to start a fight, actually. I liked the movie, and I just wanted to say that. But this brought out the moon landing deniers, perhaps predictably, and I responded to one of them saying simply that I hate the moon landing conspiracy theory because it's not only baseless, but it also seeks to undermine the greatest achievement in American history. And that post got hundreds of responses, and much to my chagrin, though should not have been to my surprise, the vast majority of the comments were from people who deny that the moon landing exists. In fact, I basically got ratioed on Twitter for saying that the moon landing happened. That's how bad things have gotten. Now, I'd like to think that my Twitter comments are not representative of the general public, but polling says otherwise. The most recent survey I've seen, conducted in 2019, found that only about 60% of the public strongly disagrees with the theory that the moon landing was fake. And that leaves about 40% who do not strongly disagree with the theory that the moon landing is fake. 5% strongly agree with the theory. Another 6 or 7% agree with it less strongly. And the rest are, at least to some degree, apparently open to the idea that the moon landing never happened and was all set up on a soundstage somewhere in Hollywood, I guess. Now, the very first thing that you should ask yourself when evaluating any conspiracy theory, because there are plenty of conspiracy theories that have turned out to be true, right? That doesn't mean that they're all true, though. So reflexively dismissing every conspiracy theory is very low IQ. But reflexively believing all of them is also low IQ. And so we want to be critical thinkers, and we want to take them on a case-by-case basis, which I think most people do. So looking at a conspiracy theory, very first thing you should ask yourself is how many people would need to be involved for it to work? And if the answer is that a relatively small number of high-level, powerful people would have to be involved, then your theory at least has a chance of passing the initial smell test. But if the answer is that the conspiracy would necessitate the close cooperation and secrecy of thousands of people across multiple agencies and institutions, then you're going to have to meet a very, very high evidentiary bar to make your theory even slightly credible. The one thing we know about human beings in general, and human beings in government especially, is that they are very bad at keeping secrets. And the chance of the secret being kept drops exponentially as you add more people to it. We all understand this. I mean, you tell one person a secret, it's very hard to get them to keep it. Tell 10 people, and it's extremely difficult to get them to keep it. 1,000 is basically impossible. So, what about the fake moon landing? Well, this would require the coordination and absolute secrecy of the astronauts who are on these fake missions, and also everybody at mission control. It would also have to either involve everybody at NASA or a portion of people at NASA, and the latter is even more incredible because that would mean that the secret was being kept from a bunch of people at NASA by other people at NASA. No matter what, that's a very dubious proposition, but it goes beyond that. Of course, knowledge of this conspiracy would have to go up the ranks in government. Not everybody in the Pentagon and White House had to know, but some of them would have had to know. And already we have multiple governmental entities working together on this and keeping the secret for decades without a single leak. But it's not contained just to government. If this was filmed on a sound stage, then the film crew, sound engineers, the guys who built the props, the studio or company that owned whatever sound stage they used, and so on, all these people would either have to be in on it or would have to be involved without knowing that they're in on it, which is even less likely. So now we have multiple government agencies and dozens, if not hundreds of bureaucrats all working together seamlessly alongside multiple civilians, some of whom work in the film industry. These are the two gossipy, least tight-lipped worlds in existence, Hollywood and government. And yet, after 6 decades, nobody in either world has ever breathed a single word about this, ever. But it's even more fantastical than that. You may be aware that the moon landing occurred, or was fake supposedly, in the middle of the Cold War, and that's largely why it was faked, according to the theory. But the Soviets were monitoring our space program just as closely as we were monitoring theirs. It's inconceivable that we could have planned, set up, and executed a fake moon landing and pulled this ruse over on the public without the Soviets being fully aware of what we'd done. And yet they never accused us of faking the landing. The Soviet Union never denied the legitimacy of the landing one time. In fact, at this point, there are over 70 space agencies around the globe. Many of them have their own satellites, their own probes and telescopes and so on. If the most famous space-related achievement in history was completely fake, then it would seem nearly certain that at least some of the people and at least some of those other global space agencies would know it, or at least suspect it. Yet no accusations have ever been made by anybody who would be in a position to actually know anything about this. Which means either that many dozens or hundreds of conspirators in NASA, the White House, the Pentagon, and Hollywood were so brilliant and devious that they tricked even the Soviet spies who were monitoring them, along with every other global space agency, or these other agencies are in on it, which brings the conspiracy to thousands of people across dozens of countries and 6 decades. Now, this is all complicated by the fact that, according to the conspiracy theorists, the plot actually wasn't well executed at all. According to them, NASA did a shoddy job of pulling it off, made a number of extremely obvious mistakes. Mistakes that were so boneheaded that a bunch of people on Twitter can easily spot them just by a cursory glance at the photos. So this was a brilliant scheme pulled off by the most powerful entities in human history that anyone on Twitter could look at the photo for 5 seconds and go, "That was fake. Yep, totally fake." Now, we'll get to those alleged mistakes in a moment, but you see the problem here, I hope. In order for this theory to work, the conspiracy would need to be the most brilliant and well-coordinated and devious hoax of all time, and also the dumbest and clumsiest and most obvious. It would need to be both of those things simultaneously, which it can't be. And all of this means that before we even look at the supposed evidence, we already have a fake moon landing that is far more complicated and difficult and implausible than actually just landing on the moon. We have an alternative theory that is by far and away more convoluted and far-fetched than the official narrative that it seeks to debunk. So Occam, with his razor, is spinning in his grave right now. So what is the evidence that can overcome this enormous logical deficit? What proof is there that the moon landing was fake? Well, let's take a look at the 3 big pieces of evidence that the deniers offer and that have been all over my mentions on Twitter all weekend long. So first, moon landing deniers point to what they consider to be anomalies in the photographs taken on the moon. And they point out how you can't see any stars in the sky, right? And you should be able to because they were in space. They say that the shadows are coming in at weird angles rather than straight and parallel as they should be if all the shadows are cast by a single light source, which would be the sun. They point to the picture of the American flag appearing to wave as it stands planted in the lunar surface. They say that this makes no sense because there wouldn't have been any wind on the moon to cause the flag to wave. And finally, they say that footage of the lunar module taking off from the moon's surface is clearly fake because there wouldn't have been any cameraman left behind to take the footage. Now, of course, all of these points are very easily explained. The flag was not waving. There was a horizontal bar at the top of the flag. So there's the flag pole and then a horizontal bar with the flag unfurling underneath it. And you can see this in the picture if you look at it. The stars aren't visible in the sky because they landed during the lunar daytime. And the moon does have day and nighttime. You might not have known that. It does. And that's when the sun's light reflects brightly off the surface, making it so that you can't see the stars in the photo. And as for the shadows, there is absolutely nothing strange about the fact that they come in at different angles. Go outside on a sunny day and take a picture, and you will see exactly the same phenomena. The uneven surface, the angle of the lens, the perspective from where you take the picture, all will cause the shadows to appear that way. Again, anyone could go outside right at this very moment and confirm this point yourself. And how did they get the footage of the lunar module taking off? Well, that footage is from Apollo 17, not Apollo 11. They left behind a camera that was controlled remotely from Earth. And the reason why we didn't get that footage until Apollo 17 is because they tried it on 2 or 3 other moon missions and it didn't work because it's sort of difficult to pull off a remote-controlled selfie on the moon. These are the easy, common sense, accurate explanations for what you see in the photographs. And these explanations make significantly more sense than the alternative theory. Okay, if they were going to go through all this trouble to fake the pictures, why would they neglect to add stars to the sky? Like, wouldn't that be the first thing you do if you were faking a picture of outer space? Why would they pretend the moon has wind? Like, the moon landing deniers are the ones who bring up these supposed anomalies in the photos, except that their theory makes less sense of the anomalies than the story they're trying to refute. Because the anomalies are not anomalies. They are very easily explained, and there is nothing mysterious or strange about them. Grand Canyon University is an affordable, private Christian university based in Phoenix, Arizona. They're dedicated to making education fit into your busy schedule, which is why they offer 270 of their academic programs online. From scholarships to academic support, GCU's graduation team provides you with the personal support you need to obtain your goals. GCU's online programs offer you the freedom to earn your degree on your own time from wherever you are. GCU is praised for its culture of community, giving, and impact. They integrate the free market system and a welcoming Christian worldview into all of their academic programs. Achieve your goals with a personalized plan and a supportive team behind you. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University, private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu. That's gcu.edu. The second bit of evidence presented by moon landing deniers is the existence of something called the Van Allen belt, which is a zone surrounding the planet inside the Earth's magnetic field that contains high levels of radiation. And the deniers say that astronauts would be killed if they tried to pass through it. Now, this certainly would be a devastating point if it was true, but it isn't. The Van Allen belt does exist, there is radiation, but the spacecraft passes through it very quickly. It's going very fast. And that minimizes the radiation exposure. And ultimately, the amount of radiation they're exposed to isn't much more than a couple of chest x-rays. So it's, you can be exposed to radiation without being killed on the spot. It's just if the radiation is mitigated and minimized. Third, and perhaps most commonly cited piece of evidence to support moon landing denialism is that we haven't gone back. As many people have argued to me over the weekend, if we really landed on the moon, then why haven't we ever gone back? Well, the first answer is that we did. We went back 5 additional times. So if you deny that we've landed on the moon, you are actually claiming 6 moon hoaxes. You are saying that this whole vast conspiracy was spun up and planned and executed 6 times in a row. So why didn't we keep going to the moon in reality? Well, how many times do you think we should have gone? I mean, would you find the story more credible if we went 10 times, 20 times? If you deny the first 6 times, will you suddenly believe it if we go another 6 times? Like, it's completely arbitrary. Well, we only went 6 times. How many times should we have gone? I don't know. 17. The real reason we stopped going to the moon is that it's expensive and it's complicated and it's dangerous. Now, it's not as complicated as pulling off a moon landing hoax 6 times, but it's complicated. People died to get the Apollo program off the ground. Space travel is fraught with risk. And as a country, we have lost the will to endure the cost and take the risk. It's true that, if you were alive in 1970, you probably would have assumed that by the year 2024, we'd be landing humans on the moons of Jupiter right by now. But just watch any any science fiction film from the 60s and 70s to get an idea of where people thought we'd be by the 2000s. We didn't get there. Why? Well, because we lost interest and we slipped into decadence and boredom. And now, to top it all off, IQ scores are declining and people are generally becoming less competent and less skilled. In 1970, we were sending rockets to the moon. That's true. Do you know what else we were doing? We were flying commercial supersonic passenger jets that could make it from New York to London in 3 hours. And if you were on one of those jets 50 years ago, you would have assumed that by 2024, we'd have the technology to go from New York to London in 3 minutes, right? Instead, we went the other way. The fastest passenger jet today that's operational will get you there in about 7 hours. Okay? Our technology seems to have regressed. Is that proof that the Concorde never existed? Does that mean that supersonic air travel was a hoax? No, it just means that the supersonic air travel was, again, expensive and difficult and cumbersome, and it came with extra risks. One crash of a Concorde jet, which eventually happened, was all it took. And the whole supersonic air travel industry was thrown on the scrap pile, and that is where it has stayed up until now. We did not build off of it. We didn't continue in that direction. We just went backwards. It's a sad story. It's a story of societal paralysis and decay, but it is not evidence that one of the most well-documented events in human history never happened. In fact, there is no evidence that the moon landing never happened. There is, again, 0 evidence of this elaborate cinematic hoax. Now, I said that I was responding to their evidence, but what you may have noticed about their evidence is that it is not evidence. What the denialists have is a few easily debunked qualms with the generally accepted narrative. They have absolutely no positive evidence for their own narrative. Not one single piece of evidence. Not one witness, not one whistleblower with direct knowledge of the conspiracy, not one photo or video of this hoax being staged. Nothing. They found some holes in the moon landing story, holes that are totally imaginary, it turns out. And inside those holes, they have stuffed this whole story that they invented out of thin air, which is a problem because the moon landing hoax theory is not just a denial of something that of something that happened, right? I'm not asking that you prove a negative. I'm not asking you to prove we never went to the moon. No. The moon landing hoax is an assertion of an entirely different event that they claim did happen. And so what I'm saying is, where is your evidence that any of that happened? You have no evidence to indicate that this event occurred. None at all. Zero. Now, the moon landing, on the other hand, has reams and reams and reams of evidence. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos and videos from the surface, interviews with the astronauts who went there, footage from other lunar probes that have gone to the moon or orbited it. There's even a laser reflector that was left on the surface. You can bounce a laser off of it today. This is a real experiment that can be conducted right now today to confirm that the reflector was left there. Now, it'll take much more sophisticated equipment than the average person has laying around, but many people with the equipment have done the experiment, because it measures the distance between the Earth and the moon at any given time, and have confirmed this. Are they all in on it too? Has the conspiracy grown even larger now? Now, if all of this is not enough to believe that we landed on the moon, then fine. But that means you also have to deny pretty much every historical event that has ever occurred. There is more direct evidence of the moon landing than there is of almost any event that happened prior to the mid-20th century. We have more direct evidence of the moon landing than we do that George Washington existed. And yet, if I claim that George Washington's existence was a hoax, you would expect me to present extremely compelling, direct, positive evidence of the hoax. And if I had none at all, you would laugh in my face, and deservedly so. Skepticism is healthy, but flatly denying a historical event in favor of a pet theory that has infinitely less evidence to support it than the event you're denying is not skepticism. It is dogmatism, which is the opposite of skepticism. And that's why there is no evidence of the moon landing that will ever convince the deniers. No matter what you show them, they can explain it away with some totally ad hoc, arbitrary wave of the hand. Photos won't convince them. Video won't convince them. First-hand testimony won't convince them. Eyewitnesses won't convince them. Lasers bouncing off of freaking reflectors planted on the moon's surface won't convince them. Nothing will. They have chosen to deny everything ahead of time. And in this case, what's being denied is one of the greatest achievements in human history. An achievement claimed by Americans for America. The history of the West is constantly being rewritten by bored, spoiled people so as to diminish the accomplishments of our ancestors and deny their many incredible contributions to mankind. And in the end, this is all part of that agenda. If there's any conspiracy going on here, there it is. And that is why the moon landing deniers are, with a great vengeance, canceled. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.